Okay, this will be an example of what your project should look like when it's done. Um, I've uploaded a PDF of a sample project. It's not perfect, it's not bad, but it does have a couple of omissions that you should correct if you want to get the maximum points. So we're going to look through this and I'll point out some of the things that are wrong. And there's a few others I might tell you about before we're done. First off, we'll look at the cover page. It looks fine. There's nothing wrong with this. Something like this is what you turn in for your cover page. It'll be great. Notice how there's no page number on this, and there better not be. Okay, starting off with the executive summary. Notice how the page number at the bottom starts. Page number 1. That's the way it's supposed to go. The report font in this case is Courier New, because it's a big font. Just like the ones that you see written on the second bullet. Now I've said the exact same thing in a smaller font, Times New Roman, in the immediate bullet below, and the difference there is one is 3.5 lines and the other is 2.5 lines. So you can see that the spacing makes a pretty significant difference. I just want to point out that the entire report that you're looking at here is also in 12-point font. It's all double spaced and there are 1-inch margins. There's no extra spaces at the beginning of paragraphs or at the end of paragraphs or in between paragraphs or after headings or anything like that. Everything is set to not add those kind of spaces in. Generally speaking, if your report is too long, make sure you switch everything to Times New Roman or another smaller font and see how it fits before you remove text. If your report's too short, then go to something like Courier New, which will make it all much bigger. Keep the entire report in a single font, please. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the executive summary. If you start reading down through this, there's one thing that'll pop out right away. There is no question clearly stated in the summary, and by clearly stated I mean a very pointed question ending with a question mark. This is a significant and giant omission that will cost you a lot of points if you do this. I also wanted to point out that this is also in excess of a page long, which is a little bit long, but this is probably due to the font. In fact, if I were to put this in Times New Roman, it would be probably more like 3/4 of a page, which is a pretty reasonable length for an executive summary. I also want to note that it is one single paragraph. Now, I want to point out when you get to the method section that the first sentence of the first paragraph of method section is in fact the question: where in Loudoun County should air quality monitoring stations be located? That is the ideal and perfect place and way to start off your method section. However, I want to point out, if you look over here to the left, we go out of the executive summary on page 1 and straight into the method section. We're missing an introduction. That is a major and significant no-no. You get points for having all your required elements. You miss one, you might as well miss 10, because you're not going to get those points. So that's a significant oversight on this report. Now, if you read through the summary and the methods, just about everything that you would need to say in the introductory section is there. It's just not separated out and put into its right place. So make sure that you have all of those required components, like an introduction. And so you would need to, rewrite that, cut and paste elements from those other sections and fill that in. If the missing section was here, the other thing that would have happened is it would have probably been long enough, because in Times New Roman this thing was only about 3 3/4 pages long. It wasn't quite 4 pages. But if it had that section, it would have been long enough and we could have got rid of this giant new Courier New font, and been in Times New Roman or something more manageable. Okay, so next I want to talk about the reference sections, and I want to show you how I reference stuff. See how I reference the table in the text? This I I want to see it this way in your paper. So we'll look here, and in the results and conclusions, I've got just copied a little section of text, and it says, using upon processing the spatial data, several items became very clear. First, while Loudoun County is thought of as a progressive business environment, there is a relatively small industrial footprint. And then it says see Table 1. If you go to Table 1, it shows the amount of zoning versus the amount of other stuff in the county, or the amount of industrial zoning versus other stuff. And you can see there's really not that much industrial zoning. The thing I want you to point out is how it says see Table 1. And that's how you reference the tables in your text. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about how you reference information. And I've got an example over here. This analysis was based on two data sets. The road data was developed from the Tagger line shape files and related database files. And then there you have it. U.S. Census Bureau, 2012, in parentheses. And that's the way you would be. It would be author, comma, year of publication. It goes on to say the zoning data is also public domain data, free to the public and downloadable from the Loudoun County GIS office website, parentheses, Loudoun County GIS, 2017, parentheses, and then the period for the end of the sentence. The quotation reference at the end of the sentence comes before the period, just like in these examples. Now, with maps, you basically do it the same way, just like you did with the tables. You can see in this example here, when I examined visually, there was obvious patterns in how and where industrial locations were found, and then it's got see map 1. And that would tell me to then go look at map 1, and it would be explaining the things I'm talking about. And that's it. Okay, so next is the reference section, and I've got two examples here. One is done more correctly than the other one, and some of these I would probably almost let slide, but would not. In the actual document that I gave you, the references are listed the way they are up here on the top right. And so just to go over this again, the first thing is the author, and so when we're looking at the Loudoun County zoning data, and these are listed alphabetically, L does come before U, and so the author was the Loudoun County GIS. You could call it Loudoun County GIS Office or Loudoun County Open, whatever you want to call it. I'll work with you on that because it's not always clear how to cite things like that. Next is the year of publication. In this case, when I went to their site, it was last updated in January of this year, so it was 2017 data. And the data that I was particularly interested in was Loudoun zoning, and so that's the title of what we're looking at. And the publisher is GIS Open Data Loudoun County, Virginia. And it is available at, and I provide the web address, and then I verified that it was available on that date. That's in parentheses followed by a period. Same format for the census data. Who wrote it? U.S. Census Bureau. When? 2012. What is it? It's the Tagger line shape files and Tagger line files. Period. And who is in charge of this? The U.S. Census Bureau. Where is it available at? This website address. When was it verified? On that date. So that's the pretty standard kind of format for it. Notice how you have this first line going all the way to the left and everything else moving in. That's called a hanging indent. And so when you set up your paragraphs, you can go to none or justified, or there's all different kinds of indentation, but hanging is the one you select to make it look like that. Down here at the bottom is mostly all that data, but it's not laid out that way. It's kind of sort of wrong looking, but it has most of the information. It's the GIS Open Data, Loudoun County, Virginia, zoning data layer when it was modified. the website address, and when it was last accessed. What I don't have is when it was published. I really don't have an author. I sort of have an author, but I really don't have a publisher, so it's just kind of, it's close, but not quite. If you make your references more like the ones on the top, you'd be better off. The little trick I used was there's a website or a citation manager that you can fire up, but all you guys really need to do is use this. And so whoever wrote the document, or whoever made the data, for example, that's your author. If it's a person, last name, comma, first initial, period. If it's more than one person, if it's two people, last name, comma, first initial, period, comma, and then first initial of the second author, period, last name, second author, period. If it's more than two authors, you're going to list all of them, and it'll follow the same format as two. The first guy or gal, it's last name, comma, first initial, period, comma, and then every remaining author after that, it's initial, period, last name, comma, initial, period, last name, comma, until you get to the end of the authors list, and then it's a period, and then you immediately follow that by the date of publication, another period, and then the title, what the data actually is. So this is kind of, imagine you downloaded a digital elevation model, okay, and so you're doing the squirrel thing, and it's from the West Virginia GIS Tech Center, but it's really a USGS download, and so you pop open the metadata and you look at it, or you look at the information on the website, and whatever you come up with. The author is the United States Geological Survey. The data itself came from 1993, so that would be the publication date. And then the title would be Digital Elevation Model of West Virginia. The publisher would be the U.S. Geological Survey, United States Geological Survey, and it would be available at, and then you would put in the website address from, for example, the West Virginia GIS Tech Center, and then a verified date, meaning the last time you actually looked to see that the data was there and that you could get it still. Pretty simple. Again, if you make your references look, for the most part, like those on the top right, you'll be fine. If they look more like those on the bottom left, I'm probably going to knock some points off, but I'm not going to bury you for it. Now, I don't have a slide for it, but I want you to notice the maps at the end of the reference project document that I gave you guys, the PDF in the folder, the example. Some of the maps are okay. Some of the maps are missing components. Map 3 does not have a north arrow, doesn't have a scale bar. The legend has an obtuse looking word value in the legend, which should not be there. So there's little things like that that are indications that it's a crappy map. It was put together without a lot of thought, because I had the other 3 maps and they looked okay, and I needed the other one, but I had closed up stuff or something, and anyway I couldn't go back and change it without doing a lot of stuff over, and so I just jammed it in quick, fast, in a hurry, just like a lot of you are going to do when you get jammed up for time. So that would cost you points overall, because I think the example is pretty well written, because I wrote most of it. You get a lot of points for that. I think it's original. You get a lot of points for that. I think it's more complicated than what you're required to do, so you get points for that. You get points for a lot of things there in terms of what I'm looking at. Doesn't have an introduction. That's a problem. You're missing some map components, that's a problem. Questions not clearly stated on some other things, that's a problem. Even though I like it, even though I wrote it, probably wouldn't give it any higher than a B. Might even give it a low B or maybe even a high C. But that would be the range, and a lot of it would depend on how significant the omissions were to the total project. So I hope this helps you guys, and again, we'll have class next week. I'll be there to provide additional insight and help you figure these things out. I will be showing you some more videos on how to do some of these things later on in terms of how to make your basic PowerPoint for what we're going to do, and hopefully this will be a low stress, fun activity for everyone. Okay, so use these resources wisely. Make sure you watch all these and listen to everything before you come calling for help. Otherwise, enjoy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you guys next week.